Hey everybody, Jamie Starr here for the New World News Network. Today on this video, I'm going to talk about something that sort of ties into the video I did about the progressives pathologizing. I forget, I had an amazing title, a lot of alliteration, but it was progressives pathologizing something and pathologizing personal problems into public politics. That's what it was. But in this video, we're going to deal with projection. And it's basically going to be asking the question, is it perception or is it projection when certain issues arise? So I have a few bullet points here that I want to get into, including the concept of white privilege, the police defunding, feminism, the 1%, the election, and how it all sort of boils into an us versus them mentality. So first, let's get into what is projection. Psychological projection is a defense mechanism where a person denies his own thoughts and emotions subconsciously and then ascribes them to others. This is extremely common when people discuss political theories or policy. So, I think the most obvious one in this day and age would be the matters concerning race. Now, a video I recommend everyone check out. Tim Pool recently had Elijah Schaffer on from Slightly Offensive, and they did an amazing show together. I cannot recommend it enough because just the way they sort of, went back and forth in the banter and the sort of insight each of them had, and, the points they were able to pull out of each other, so on point with so many of the things. And trying to think what was the specific point they covered. I know projection was a big part of it. It'll come back to me. But anyway, oh, I remember what it was. Avowed racists. So, in the Democratic Party, Robin DiAngelo being the main figurehead of this issue, as I pointed out in my video about the progressives and their, pathologizing personal problems into public politics. What this woman has done, basically her hustle or her grift, has been that she has identified that she is a racist, that she has these racist tendencies, that being around black people makes her feel uncomfortable. And, if she's at a dinner party and it's a room full of white people, she's fine until the black person comes in. And then all of a sudden she's, oh my God, there's a black person here. Are they going to feel uncomfortable? I'm uncomfortable by them, this and that and everything else. And instead of her looking in the mirror and being like, oh my God, I've got some shit I've got to work out, she then says, well, this is her white fragility, her construct of whiteness, and that it's a white people problem, it's not a personal problem, and all of this other. So it gets her own internal problems get projected outward. Similarly, I brought up Black Lives Matter, the founders having these daddy issues, and that being why they want to destroy the nuclear family and everything like that. So again, as the little blurb I just read, this is very common. Elijah and Tim go through this thread, though. I believe it was educators or some people like that. And I mean, you see this whether it's Tim, whatever his name is, or that old white woman, where they go around and they give these lectures to people and they basically say, you are racist, you must admit you're racist and atone for your racism, and so on and so forth. And you have these liberals that buy into it, and then they come out and they say, I am racist, I will try to do better, I am privileged, I will try to do better, whatever. And Tim Pool said, you know what, I'm going to take them at their word. They're racist. They say they're racist, so why would I argue with them? I'm just going to not side with them. That's what I'll do. That'll be my stance in this. I don't want any part of this party that has avowed racists in it. One of the biggest displays of this was when Richard Spencer came out. Richard Spencer, who's, the poster boy of white supremacy now for some reason, came out and denounced Donald Trump because Donald Trump isn't a racist or a white supremacist. said he wasn't doing enough to advance identitarian identity politics and all of this other stuff. And then you have Joy Reid on The View saying Richard Spencer has denounced Trump. And I mean, in this beautiful display of lack of self-awareness, Joy Reid is celebrating white supremacists denouncing Trump, and then they're all clapping for the white supremacist because they'd rather be on the side of white supremacy than on the side of Trump, even though they claim they hate Trump because he's a white supremacist, but the white supremacist won't back him because he's not a white supremacist. I mean, this is a sort of circular logic thing. I mean, even good example, even when I was going through all of this, I was pulling articles and just sort of pick out some bullet points about projection and everything like that. And one of the interesting ones I found was an article accusing the GOP of engaging in projection in 2008. Now, I nothing about that party going on in 2008 would I agree with, stand with, or back. The figurehead in which they were pointing to is John McCain, who I have no kind feelings towards or anything like that. Interesting thing is, so the one article mentions McCain claiming that Obama would engage in class warfare and economic redistribution. And then they point to some GOP thing that gave money to the wealthy and claimed that was, class warfare and economic redistribution and so on and so forth. So they said, look at McCain, he's this liar, he's projecting, he's a monster, whatever, right? So then there was a newer article about projection in politics claiming Trump's the bad guy, and all of a sudden they are, well, how could Trump deny the heroism of John McCain and this and that? And it's like, until Trump arrived, John McCain was seen as a warmonger who was like the problem in politics. And it really just shows you how when this us versus them mentality, the lines are not rigid. It's all based on who the them is. And whatever side, if you're on the other side of the them, you're automatically included into the us, and all of your past sins will be forgiven. Example of this on the top of my head, Joy Reid, she could, and numerous other people in the media, but they could have hot mic moments, old blog posts, whatever pop up, but they'll never be canceled as long as they're with the us. If they are currently with the us, any of the past doesn't matter, because going after the them is of utmost importance. So it's again, it's hard to rationalize for a normal person, this fluctuating battle lines, basically, because power is the ultimate end goal. So everyone's a pawn. It really doesn't matter what your opinions are. If you're in the battle and you're helping the us take down the them, that's all that matters. So anyway, back to the point of projection. Throughout the whole race thing, you see this just, and equally could be said about the feminist ideas of, anyone who's making these sweeping generalizations. Like, I was talking to my boss recently at one of my jobs, and she was telling me about another business owner who posted a thing on Facebook saying how, when I get pulled over by the cops, I don't have to worry about if I'm gonna die or this and that, and black people do, and all of this other stuff. And it's again her projecting her views onto everyone. Because I told my boss, I said, listen, I have a friend of mine that got pulled over by the cops. They brought him into the station and they found coke on him. He said it was his to not get a trafficking charge. And next thing you know, they were lecturing him saying, oh man, you do so much for the community. You got so much going for you. Don't be doing drugs. Like, why would you do that? They took the drugs. Maybe they wrote him a ticket, but he didn't get arrested. He didn't get locked up or anything like that. So this whole idea of, cops, I mean, maybe that's not a good example because, again, she's saying she views things differently. But here's a better example. When people are talking about white privilege and saying they just want to be treated the same. They are under the presumption that you see this a lot with the whole like, well, there's white men in these positions and this and that, and you know, they forget that it's just a majority white country, so that explains a lot of the statistical disparities. But they will have this, their perception is that all of this has been done through special favors or racial, some sort of racial bond. I honestly, as a white person, it is hard to verbalize this because to me it's not an identity, it's a description. My skin color happens to be a shade of white to people. I don't see myself in that way, so it's hard for me, you know, when they talk about black people being pulled over by the cops and all this other stuff, what the underlying thing that they're saying, and again, sorry I'm working my way through this and it's not better verbalized, but what they're basically implying is if they were the police officer and they pulled over a black person, they would just let them go. I mean, it really is the only reason someone could make these broad, sweeping claims and be so sure and arrogant of themselves, because whenever they're saying you are, they are, what they're saying is I am, I would. They're speaking for themselves, but pushing it off onto everyone else. So if a woman thinks that men are, you know, giving each other like it's some good old boys club and they're not, you know, in competition against each other and they're all just lifting each other up and saying let's hold these women down, even though you should really know men are more likely to be nicer to women because obvious reasons. They're saying, you know, I would treat women better. I've dated female teachers. You look at their Pinterest page, they make no qualms about their interest is in educating women to be the future and all of this other stuff, because they view the world as being sexist, so therefore it justifies them giving special attention to women and everything else. So it's this whole thing, and it's a chicken or the egg question of, were you this way and then you are finding justifications for it? Or do you have this false perception and then you think you're reacting because of the false perception of what's going on? So again, in the race issues, I mean, the camaraderie with black people, you know, there is more of a familial respect. Now granted, there's the murder rates and all that, but you do see that common bond because this whole shared identity thing has been so drilled into them that there is that us versus them mentality. But then when they say, you know, this is happening to us, that's happening to us, this is happening because it's white people, Chaz is the greatest example of really a ton of this, because they say they're against all of these things and that these things are being run poorly and everything else, and then you turn around and there it is. So while I'm sort of sputtering through this, let me bring up this little thing from this article. Now, this is on the Libertarian Solution. I'm sorry I'm not going to bother doing the overlay for you guys. I just want to get this out pretty quickly. So here's a good example. Let's see. A modern liberal may claim that conservatives don't care about the poor because they oppose welfare state, but the welfare state does nothing to help the plight of the poor, as empirically evidenced. Statistically, those identifying themselves as conservative give a greater portion of their income to charity than those identifying themselves as liberal. The only way to truly help the poor, if you claim that helping the poor is a virtue that you value, is to do something about it yourself. Supporting the welfare state is the opposite of doing something about it. It forces others to do something about it, which is proven ineffective over the last century. Liberals are projecting their dislike for the poor onto the conservative opponents. And this is a great example, and I've argued this with people where You know, I've said if we lowered taxes and this and that, people could do more for those around them. And I've had someone go to me and be like, oh, well, you know, my sick aunt is only taken care of because of the state and all this other stuff. And I ask them and I say, so if you were taxed less, you wouldn't give that money to your aunt? And the reality of it is, no, they wouldn't. The only reason they're comfortable giving this money in the first place, and it's why liberals are so okay with viewing taxes as a form of charity, is because they don't have a say in it. They're forced to do it. And they know deep down inside, or maybe they don't know deep down inside, that if they weren't forced to do it, they wouldn't do it. Now, this ties into their projections onto the 1%, because they're economically illiterate. So they believe the 1% is the 1% by hoarding and stagnating money. Now, how you just end up in this position to hoard and collect money, they never really get into. All they know is the worth of these people continue to go up. Now, let's never mind the fact that all of the biggest, you know, donors and billionaires and millionaires side with this side that claims to hate the fucking millionaires and billionaires. They all backed Hillary Clinton. All of the richest counties went to her. You know, that's all irrelevant. But they seem to think that the 1% amasses wealth by amassing wealth. Like, that's not how it happens. It happens through investing and spending and, you know, betting and all of this other stuff, and there's risk involved. And they've obviously... All right, so sorry about that. I knocked the wire in the USB for my microphone came out. So what I was saying was, the 1% has amassed their wealth through spending wealth and knowing which investments will pay off, where to put their money. They're obviously very good at risk assessment. Maybe they hire firms, whatever. You know, it doesn't matter. The problem with this mindset is, though, is that these people have they're projecting their mentality onto the 1% of, well, if I had money, I'm not going to share it with anyone. I'm not going to do anything to fix the world. If I was a millionaire and billionaire, why would I just be dumping it into the ghettos of America and all of this other stuff? So they imagine, you know, that's not what these people are doing. But it's also why they are very easily taken by the ploy of, say, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You know, he gets a pass. The Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Foundation, they get a pass. Any of these ultra wealthy liberals that set up these foundations, well, all of a sudden they get a pass because they're viewed as doing some philanthropy work or something like that. Another interesting area of this whole projection game is when it comes to the elections. Now, interesting thing that's going on is, in every presidential election of the past however many years, and I could do a whole other video on this, every time the Democrats lose, they claim that it is because of, you know, they've been cheated or, you know, something like that. Even though the majority of the country polls conservative on the issues and everything like that. And I've even seen these studies that say, oh, you know, America is turning more liberal because of gay marriage. Well, when Trump won on the Republican ticket, he was hugging a rainbow flag. So you can't just say people are for gay marriage, therefore they're going to start voting Democrat. It's not how things work. And there's numerous other topics like that that they then infer America is becoming more liberal out of, thinking that these issues are owned by the parties. But the interesting thing about this is, since the Florida recount, which had, I just saw a Bill Whittle video where he gets into this, and a lot of this, because of my age as a teenager, couldn't care less. I was unaware that they used to have these mechanical machines that like counted hole punches, but then they switched to electronic machines that could be tampered with. Now we see this mail-in thing. So there's also the voter ID thing. So the same party that's claiming elections are being meddled with, voter suppression, and all of this other stuff are constantly trying to change the rules. So again, projection. They're the ones meddling with the elections. They're the ones changing the rules. and they accuse everyone else of trying to do this. I believe there was another thing I had in here. Oh yeah, here's another one. They accused Trump of colluding with foreign powers to affect the election. And in reality, the Steele dossier was given to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Steele was a British spy. He is a foreign asset giving this fake dossier to the Clintons. So they meddled with foreign powers and, you know, foreign spies and all this other stuff to justify their whole impeachment campaign and everything like that. During the impeachment campaign, they accused Republicans of acting in a partisan fashion by not going along with this, even though the whole charade, that's what it was. I mean, Hillary Clinton, you know, Trump's not going to respect the results of the election if he loses. Then he wins, and what do we see? They're prepping the stage for this now with this red mirage thing. They're already saying, you know, well, you know, when Biden wins, Trump's not going to accept it, and we're going to have to send in the military and pull him out and this and that. And even if it appears if he wins, you know, the mail-in ballots won't have been counted by then. And, you know, there's going to be some reason why it's all a red mirage and all the, I mean, they're prepping the stage and already going through their projection routine on this whole thing. So let's see, the 1%, feminism. Oh, the police defunding thing. Here's another interesting one where, you know, very recently you had de Blasio and all these people, oh, we're going to cut the funding to New York police and this and that because they thought that it would appease these protesters and rioters and all that. Well, it hasn't. It's descended into lawlessness. So Trump comes out and says, all right, I'm going to cut your federal funding because obviously you're not doing anything with it. So why would we give it to you? Well, now de Blasio's all, you know, him and Cuomo were all up in arms because how dare Donald Trump stop sending, you know, the gravy train to New York when they're not, you know, getting in line and at least keeping the city safe for the people that live there. So it's you know, they're accusing Trump of being a monster because Trump says he's going to do the exact same thing they claim they would do. The only difference is which pot of cash they're cutting the funding from. So there's another example of this. And, you know, again, just to wrap this up, because I wanted to keep it nice and short, it's always boiling down to the us versus them mentality. And this is why a lot of people lack the self-awareness to realize they're doing this, because they have in their heads dehumanized and devalued the person that they are pointing to the point where they're just so comfortable ascribing these motives that they're very certain about to these other people. And it's again why these people don't get called on it. You know, one of the other things that's interesting, Dave Rubin and Michael Knowles. Dave Rubin did his 30 days offline, and Michael Knowles did his sort of welcome back to the world show with him. And damn it, why does this keep happening where I keep setting up these clips and then blanking on what they're talking about? God, if this wasn't the last point, I am so sorry for this, everyone. This is the problem with just throwing on the camera and trying to do these things on the fly. Whatever. Just anyway, I would recommend people check out that podcast. Oh, I remember what it is now. Again, so sorry for this. No morals. You know, it's this thing where I guess one of the guys from some liberal organization got caught in some sort of cuckolding thing with the wife's pool boy or something like that, and you basically have the left hopping on it because and the thing people point out is like, wait, isn't this the same side of the aisle that's all like, oh, polygamy, LGBT, you know, whatever? That's another one where the and this ties into that, the whole claim about Christians being so judgmental and everything like that. You know, they claim these religious people are so judgmental. And the main difference is because one side has standards and the other side doesn't have standards. But it's the side that doesn't have any standards that's always judging everyone else based on the standards they don't have. I don't know if you, like, let me put it to you like this. And this isn't hyperbole. I know people on Facebook that all the time will be trying to shame Christians or Christian figures, or, you know, this I mean, he would be one to pile on this conservative guy being like, oh, well, I'm sure you're Bible thumping God, you know, whatever, and your wife sleeping with the pool boy and you watching and this and that. And meanwhile, right after it, I mean, this person will be in drag, worshiping Satan, sniffing poppers, talking about an orgy they're having later that night. I mean, that's the true insanity of it all, where someone who has no standards or morals or anything like that, that really has a Crowleyan do as thou wilt mentality, will be pointing to others saying, look at them, they're a hypocrite. And the point Knowles and Ruben make on this is, hypocrisy, when you have no standards yourself and no morals and nothing like that, the only thing you can point to the other person and judge them upon is their hypocrisy. And the problem with this is Christians are aware that they are sinners. It's why they ask for forgiveness. So, I mean, that's the sort of, you know, most warped way that this thing manifests itself, where people with no standards whatsoever will then be trying to hold others to the standards that they like to, you know, espouse and aspire to. So yeah, that's my little rant today about the perceptions and projections. Please, everyone, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, follow me on social media at Jamie Star Music on here and Parler and Twitter and wherever else you can find me, and have a good one, everyone.